As the boat pulled up to the docks and seemed to almost settle itself majestically against the side of the pier, the dwarf leaped off onto the docks. He fell to his knees and started kissing the docks. Guklu yelled out something dwarvish and then looked around happily at his disembarking friends. "We are finally home," he said with a big smile. "Let us go celebrate the return of the conquering heroes." The last was shouted so loud that a merchant heading to his ship up the dock jumped 3 feet, and started walking rapidly away from the boisterous dwarf. Guklu laughed to himself and then fell into step along with his other 3 friends. After paying off the dock master for the berthing fees and protection money, it is sometimes better to pay now than later, Hayvan thought with a grin. They headed into the town. The first premonition that something was wrong came in the form of a good friend, Kuruma, the captain of the local guards. "Hayvan," he boomed across the distance between us, "I am glad you are back safe from the latest adventure." Kuruma never said anything soft when it could be yelled at you. He was the same with everyone, from a hard knock on the head to a drunk patron causing trouble to cutting a local bandit in 8 pieces with the 2 swords he carried at all times. Sometimes he carried a few things to extremes, but he was a good man nevertheless, and a very good friend to have at your back in a fight. The premonition of trouble came in the form of his slightly droopy shoulders, and the look of concern that crossed his face on seeing the happy group. "I seem to have the dubious honor of bearing some bad news for you," he said in a slightly lower tone that only carried about 10 feet. A whisper to him. Tedavi got the look that said he was using his powers, and then he quickly looked at the rest of us with a look of slight horror on his face. "It is your family, Hayvan. Something has happened to them and to the forest home you dwell in." He thought to everyone's minds. Years of travel and battles together have made it so that sometimes the friends seem to think with one mind. Quickly they backed away from Hayvan, as he reached into the magic around him and took the form of a giant griffin. "He is almost losing it," OK said to everyone else with a note of awe in his voice, "for this is not a natural form, and he is thinking of fighting and speed." OK, that was correct. The griffin is a fearsome beast in and of itself, with the front half of an eagle, and the rear half of a lion. To have a giant one appear in front of them caused all the companions to take a step back for only a moment, and then they were all racing to climb aboard the Hayvan Express. "Beware, dear friend druid, don't let your worry and panic bring more danger to your family," Tedavi said in the tone of voice he saves for use with those he considers dangerous and slightly crazy. He is right, Hayvan thought to himself. I can't help anyone if I lose it and start attacking my friends. But this is a great, powerful form. He finished the personal thought as he shot off the ground in a powerful downstroke of mighty wings, shooting off in the direction of his home. "Cartel, fly ahead and see what you see, and we will be right behind you. Be careful, though, there may still be enemies around." For once he obeyed without a snide comment about being around such a large flying creature, which showed how worried the great eagle was. He shot off like a rocket in the sky. Hayvan quickly came to realize that he could see nothing through the first canopy as the mighty griffin form, so they quickly landed to track on foot. Hayvan quickly sent Cartel to fly ahead and see what he could scout, but he had an idea already where his family may have been taken. There have been rumors of a cave deep in the first that goblins had overrun, and some dark magic was starting to infuse the place. Hayvan and the cavaliers were already planning to visit the goblin cave and see what the trouble was, but now there was a much more pressing matter, the rescue of his family. As the companions pressed forward through the dense woods, the towering trees seemed to grow ever taller, their gnarled roots twisting around the earth like ancient serpents. The air grew thick with mist, and the only sounds were the soft rustling of leaves and the occasional call of distant birds. Hayvan, leading the group, felt an odd stillness settle over them. "We've been traveling for hours, and still no sign of the cave," Uklu grumbled, his thick accent muffled by the mist. "Is it just me, or is this forest getting Thicker. Thicker, yes, Tedavi replied, his face serious. But also alive. Okay, ever the quiet observer, paused and scanned the surroundings with a frown. Something is watching us. Don't be absurd, Uklu scoffed, tightening his grip on his axe. It's just a forest. Trees, leaves, dirt. Nothing to be scared of. But Hayvan had felt it too. The air around them seemed to hum with strange energy, as if the very forest had awakened to their presence. He extended his senses into the natural world around him, seeking to understand what was lurking just beyond their sight. His brow furrowed as a faint, melodic whisper reached his ears. Guardians of the woods are nearby, Hayvan muttered, his voice low. Spirits of the forest. They test travelers. Great. Now we've got spirit problems, Uklu muttered, clearly not thrilled by the idea of facing an unseen enemy. Before Hayvan could respond, a sudden gust of wind stirred the mist, and from the depths of the trees, ghostly figures began to emerge. They were tall, ethereal beings, draped in flowing green robes, their faces hidden behind masks of bark and leaves. Their eyes, glowing softly, watched the companions with silent intensity. Who dares to trespass in the sacred forest? One of the spirits intoned its voice, a whisper carried by the wind. The forest demands respect. Hayvan stepped forward, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. We seek only to pass through, to reach the cave beyond. We mean no harm to your home. Another spirit, its voice like the rustling of leaves, spoke. Words alone will not earn you safe passage. Prove your respect, or turn back. The companions exchanged uneasy glances. Uklu grumbled but kept his axe at his side. Ok silently strung his bow, his eyes scanning the trees for any movement. Tedavi, sensing the tension, whispered a prayer under his breath, his hammer glowing faintly with divine energy. The first spirit raised its hand, and in a flash, the forest seemed to come alive. Vines shot from the ground, twisting and coiling around the companion's legs, pulling him off balance. Uklu swung his axe with a roar, cleaving through the thick vines, but more grew in their place, thicker and stronger. We must answer their challenge, Hayvan said, his voice steady. We are travelers, but we respect this land. We will prove our worth. The spirits stirred, their forms flickering with energy. Then prove it. With a wave of their hands, the spirits unleashed a powerful gust of wind, causing the forest to become a labyrinth of moving branches and shadowed paths. The companions had no choice but to draw their weapons and fight back against the natural forces that rose around them. Uklu, his feet planted firmly on the ground, swung his axe through the air in wide arcs, cleaving through the ethereal vines that lashed at him. This is not what I signed up for. He roared, his voice filled with determination as his massive axe struck a glowing vine, severing it with a crack. Tedavi raised his hammer, and a bolt of blue lightning crackled from its tip, striking one of the spirits. The ethereal being flickered and momentarily vanished, only to reappear, its form now shimmering with renewed intensity. I hate these things. Uklu shouted, swiping his axe at another vine that had wrapped around his legs. They're like ghosts. But angrier. Ok, standing at a distance, fired arrows with deadly precision, each one aimed at the glowing eyes of the spirits. His first shot missed, but the second pierced the heart of one of the forest beings. It let out a sharp, haunting wail as it disintegrated into dust. Hayvan, drawing upon his druidic power, stepped forward, his body glowing with a faint aura. He extended his hand toward the nearest tree, calling upon the forest's energy. The ground trembled as roots erupted from the earth, wrapping around the spirits, and pulling them to the ground with incredible force. Enough! Hayvan called, his voice commanding. We do not seek to harm, only to pass. Let us prove our respect. We are but travelers. We stopped fighting when we could lay waste in this area of the forest. Does not show you we have respect for you and yours. For a moment, the spirits hesitated, their ethereal forms flickering as the wind howled through the trees. Then, slowly, the vines and roots receded, and the spirits rose, their faces no longer hidden behind masks of bark. You have shown respect, one of the spirits said, its voice a whisper. The forest will allow you to pass. The mist around them began to clear, and the path ahead opened. The spirits faded into the trees, leaving behind a tranquil silence. That was intense, Tedavi said, wiping sweat from his brow. Guklu scowled but grinned. I'll take on goblins any day over that. Hayvan nodded solemnly, feeling the weight of the encounter. The forest is not easily tamed. But we have earned its trust now. Now, we continue. After their tense encounter with the forest spirits, the companions pressed on, their path leading them toward a vast swamp. The air grew thick with humidity, and the ground beneath their feet became soft and treacherous. The once dense forest began to thin, replaced by murky water and knee-high reeds. Hayvan led the way, his keen senses alert as he surveyed the swamp ahead. This place smells like trouble, Guklu muttered, holding his nose as the swamp's fetid stench filled the air. I hate swamps. Too much muck and too many things that bite. Hayvan was surprised that a small swamp had been created in the first place. Most likely beavers dammed up a portion of the stream, causing this swamp. This will allow better fishing at least in the future. Hayvan always looked on the bright side, and he loved fishing when the time permitted. I've never trusted waterlogged places, OK said, his sharp eyes scanning the thick fog that clung to the swamp's surface. It's too quiet. Tedavi, who was usually unperturbed, frowned as he stepped cautiously into the wetland. Something's not right. The air here feels off. As the group ventured deeper into the swamp, the water level gradually rose, eventually reaching their waists. The thick, murky waters made every step a struggle. Hayvan, however, seemed unaffected, moving with ease through the swamp, his senses attuned to the natural world. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed from the murky depths, followed by a ripple in the water. Hayvan's eyes widened in recognition. Move! He shouted, raising his staff. Get ready. A massive shape emerged from the water, its thick, scaly hide covered in mud and slime. Its enormous, bulging eyes locked onto the group, and its sharp, serrated teeth gleamed in the dim light. The creature, resembling a giant, mutated frog, let out an earth-shaking croak as it lunged toward them. Swamp beasts. Hayvan called out. Stay alert. The swamp beast attacked with incredible speed, its large webbed feet slapping against the water as it charged. Guklu, always quick to react, swung his axe in a wide arc, but the creature was fast, dodging his blow and snapping its massive jaws at him. Get back, you overgrown tadpole! Guklu yelled, narrowly dodging a bite. He swung his axe again, landing a solid strike on the creature's flank. The beast howled in pain but retaliated with a vicious swipe of its powerful, clawed limbs. Tedavi, stepping back, raised his hammer high. A flash of blue lightning arced from his fingers, striking the beast's hide and sending a shudder through its massive body. The creature stumbled but quickly regained its footing, its bulging eyes now glowing with fury. OK, standing a few paces back, drew a swift arrow from his quiver, notching it in his bow. His eyes narrowed as he pulled the string taut. The arrow shot forth with deadly accuracy, piercing the beast's left eye. The creature howled in pain, thrashing wildly, but it was far from defeated. Hayvan, sensing the danger, called upon his druidic powers. He thrust his staff into the water, and the earth itself seemed to respond. Vines erupted from the swamp, wrapping around the creature's legs and pulling it down into the mud. The swamp beast struggled, but the more it fought, the more the vines tightened around it. "Now!" Hayvan shouted. Guklu wasted no time, charging at the immobilized creature. With a fierce roar, he swung his axe in a mighty arc, striking the beast's head with a powerful blow. The swamp beast let out one final, deafening croak before collapsing into the water with a resounding splash. Breathing heavily, the group took a moment to regroup. The swamp was eerily quiet once more, but the air still carried a sense of danger. Hayvan wiped his brow and looked around cautiously. "We need to keep moving," he said. "This swamp holds more dangers than we can handle if we stand still." After crossing the treacherous swamp, the companions found themselves at the base of a large series of hills. The air was crisp and thin as they began their ascent along a narrow, rocky path that wound its way through cliffs. Snow-capped peaks loomed above them, casting long shadows in the late afternoon light. "We are almost to the goblin cave and should be seeing some forward scouts soon. This area of the first is not well explored, and there are rumors of strange beasts in the area," Hayvan explained with a serious note in his voice. "This is more like it," Guklu grumbled, wiping sweat from his brow as he trudged up the rocky path. "I'll take these cliffs over that sticky swamp any day." "Keep your guard up," Hayvan cautioned, his eyes scanning the jagged rocks around them. "These mountains are home to more than just predators. The earth itself can be hostile." As they ascended, the path became increasingly narrow, the rocks sharp and uneven. The companions carefully picked their way along the cliffside, their movements deliberate. The wind howled around them, sending occasional gusts of snow drifting through the air. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the mountains. The ground beneath their feet trembled, and large boulders shifted, rolling down the mountainside. Hayvan instinctively raised his hand, feeling the tremors with his druidic senses. "Get ready," he warned. "We're not alone." Without warning, the ground in front of them cracked open, and a massive creature emerged. Made entirely of stone, the rock elemental was an enormous being, its body formed from jagged boulders and pebbles. Its glowing, fiery eyes locked onto the group as it let out a thunderous roar, shaking the very mountains. Guklu took a step back, his axe ready. "Rock monsters. Really?" he muttered, clearly unimpressed. "I've chopped through better rocks than that." "It's not just rock," Hayvan said, his voice serious. "It's the earth itself, alive and angry. These creatures are guardians of the mountains." The rock elemental raised a massive arm made of boulders, swinging it down toward the group with deadly force. The blow sent a shockwave through the ground, knocking Tedavi off his feet. "Move!" Hayvan shouted, as the companions scattered to avoid the powerful strike. The rock elemental continued its assault, its giant limbs crashing down with earth-shaking force. Guklu charged forward, his axe raised high. With a battle cry, he swung at the elemental's stone arm, but the blow only caused a few pebbles to fall from the creature's body. "Strong, but not that strong," Guklu grinned, ready to strike again. Tedavi, recovering from the impact, held out his hammer. With a focused chant, he summoned a bolt of lightning, sending it crackling through the air. The bolt struck the rock elemental, but the creature's stony body absorbed the blow with little effect. "These things are resistant to magic," Tedavi shouted. "We need a new approach." "Okay," his eyes narrowed with concentration, fired an arrow straight at the creature's chest. The arrow bounced harmlessly off the stone surface, but the pinpoint strike distracted the elemental long enough for Hayvan to act. Hayvan called upon the natural forces around him. As his body glowed with druidic energy, he raised his staff high, causing the earth beneath their feet to rumble. With a powerful thrust, Hayvan sent a wave of roots and vines shooting from the ground, wrapping around the rock elemental's legs and forcing it to its knees. "Now, Guklu!" Hayvan shouted. The dwarf didn't need any more encouragement. With a mighty roar, he charged at the vulnerable elemental, leaping onto its knee and swinging his massive double-bladed axe with all his might. The axe cleaved through the creature's stony arm, sending chunks of rock flying in all directions. "That's what I'm talking about," Guklu bellowed in triumph. But the battle wasn't over. The rock elemental roared in anger, its massive form still largely intact. It swung its remaining arm toward Guklu, but OK fired another arrow, striking the creature's glowing core, hidden deep within its rocky chest. The rock elemental staggered back, the blow weakening it. With a final effort, Hayvan summoned the power of the earth once more, causing the ground to shift beneath the creature's feet. The elemental stumbled and crashed to the ground with a resounding thud, its fiery eyes dimming as it crumbled into a pile of stone. "That was close," OK said, lowering his bow. Tedavi shook his head. "Too close. We can't afford another fight like that, not with what lies ahead." Guklu grinned, wiping the sweat from his brow. "I think we can handle it. Let's keep moving." As they continued their journey up the mountain, the sound of distant thunder echoed in the air, reminding them that the mountain had more secrets to reveal. But for now, they had defeated the rock elemental, and their path forward was clear, if only for a little while longer. A short hike later, Cartel came winging back down to Hayvan. "There is a large cave with goblins and other such idiots guarding the front of it, little one." Cartel always hated goblins and goblin kind and insulted him at every opportunity he had. The companions slowly and quietly, or as quiet as a dwarf could move, approached the mouth of the cave. "When did stinking goblins learn to set up some kind of perimeter? Even though it sucks, it is slightly worrisome," Guklu said in a sort of low voice. All the companions were gathered around the mouth of a large cave, about 20 feet in height. "I don't know about you guys, but I am not in a mood to be sweet and try to reason with these evil creatures," OK said with a dangerous look in his eyes. This brought everyone up short, as the archer was always the one who tried to either sneak in or talk his way out of trouble. "What? Guzel always took the extra time to cook me a vegetarian dish, even when the rest of you were having venison. I owe her." OK finished this with a look and a slight nod to Hayvan, giving his unspoken approval of his choice of mates. "I agree with OK, even though it pains me to say it out loud. Let's go trash some nasty goblins, and see what kind of trouble we can stir up from the cave. If we are lucky, there may even be some trolls we can kill a few times," Guklu said in a louder whisper and a chuckle. Only a dwarf would want to chop up regenerating enemies, just to have more to go after the next time. "I agree as well," Tedavi said with a small smile. "Fulgur despises all truly evil creatures, and I also like Guzel and the Rugrats. Let's go kick some goblin hiney." This was finished with a slightly abashed look on his face, as hiney is the worst language that Tedavi ever uses. "Thank you, my dear friends. This will be a day to remember. Let's go kill some goblins, and see what we can stir up for Guklu to play with," Hayvan said with a small smile and a soft look to his companions. Then his face hardened, and all knew the time had come. Quickly Tedavi and OK fell back a step as they took the positions to the rear, as was their lot. OK to kill from a distance, and Tedavi to keep everyone alive, and also to reach out with his magic. OK also had a second job, to keep Tedavi alive in case of a mind attack. Guklu was in his element. There is nothing dwarves love better, except maybe drinking and smithing, to killing enemies that they deem truly deserve to die. With a loud bellow in Dwarvish, that no one understood, but Tedavi still thinks is part of a dwarven drinking song, the short but deadly warrior attached. Hayvan was right behind him, staff in hand, ready to stop anything that tried to flank the mighty dwarf, and to get some revenge himself. Let us bring the claws upon him, little one. Cartel thought to Hayvan as he streaked from the sky for the first attack, ripping the eyes out of one of the goblin lookouts on top of the cave. One of the problems about fighting goblins is that you never really know how many are about. Usually, it is a lot. This time was no exception. With the first goblin shrieking as he fell from the cave top clawing at his ruined face, 20 more goblins came charging out from the front of the cave to see what was going on. Only 25 or so. Guklu yelled to the skies as he charged straight toward the largest mass of them. I had hoped to break a sweat. As he spoke, he launched out his 3 deadly decorated throwing axes. They flew into the faces of the first 3 closest goblins. 22 already, he said in a sad bellow, but goblins can't count past 5 anyway. With this interesting tidbit, he laughed out loud and crashed headlong and gleefully into the mass of goblin flesh. 21, 20, 19, 18. OK started counting down as his arrows flew true, picking off the goblins on top of the cave opening, and causing the last few at the top to yell in fear as their comrades started dropping around them. Every downed enemy had an arrow in their right or left eye. Fulgur was not ideal either. A bolt of lightning shot out and caused 3 of the ugly creatures to go down smoking and twitching. I think the dwarf has lost count, Fulgur said with a laugh as his hammer flew out almost as fast as an arrow and imploded another goblin's brains. Hayvan concentrated on his quarterstaff in his hands and shook for a second as it became enchanted, absorbing some of his druidic earth magic into the wood. With a swipe to the right and left of the dwarf, 2 more goblins crumbled. All the destruction caused by the druid, archer, and cleric paled in comparison to that caused by the dwarf. Guklu continued his war cries and started swinging his massive axe. When someone with the strength of 3 to 4 grown men starts swinging a 50-pound enchanted double-bladed axe, bad things happen to enemies. This time was no exception. As the initial collision occurred, it seemed to be raining goblin body parts. Heads, arms, legs, torsos, it seemed that the mighty dwarf believed in equal opportunity for all goblin extremities. Within 2 minutes the opening of the cave was cleared, and the only sound left was a ringing of an alarm bell deeper in the cave. All right. Guklu hollered as a glow surrounded him and all of his minor wounds healed over thanks to the cleric. I love alarm bells. I hope there are more goblins. Quote. Hold, good dwarf, Tedavi said in a calming voice as Guklu started to move down the tunnel. Something isn't right here. Let me shield you all, and then we can continue. 12. A voice seemed to speak to Hayvan's mind as Tedavi laid his hand on his shoulder. That is how many strikes the magical shielding can take before it falls apart. Of course, if it is a spell or a massive hit, like by an enraged dwarf, it may not hold up to that many. It is different for everyone and different every time. Only Tedavi doesn't seem to need to put on shielding, as his enchanted robes seem to absorb all hits sent at him. Shielding has saved all their lives many times. It almost seems a waste of magic to use shielding against goblins, OK said with a slight frown. If the previous battle is any indication, then we will still be back to the town before the morning. However, as the cleric feels inspired, so shall we follow. Only a fool argues with a deity. The last sentence was whispered, and as OK winked at Hayvan, he realized that he was the only one that was supposed to hear that comment. Maybe the elves didn't ruin his sense of humor after all, Hayvan thought to himself with a slight chuckle, earning a weird look from the cleric and dwarf. With the mighty dwarf leading the way, they entered the dark tunnel. It is always freaky to see OK's eyes start to glow in the infrared as we go into a dark area. Only elves are supposed to do that. I wonder what other gifts he received from the elves. You and your freaky druid eyes, Guklu said with a slight shudder as he glanced over and noticed that Hayvan's eyes now resembled those of a large owl. I think you should finally pay the money to just get dwarf vision. This was said with a slight chuckle as Guklu continued into the tunnel. Dwarves see in the dark as if it is high noon, only in black and white. The only one that needed light was the cleric, and he took care of this by calling forth a small ball of light that hovered over his right shoulder, giving him and everyone else in the band plenty of light to see by. As the group descended a short distance into the tunnel, they all were brought up short. In front of them, sealing off the tunnel, was a line of goblins interlocking shields, with spears out to the front. The line was slowly moving forward up the tunnel. "This is a first," Guklu said in almost an awed voice, "goblins making a shield wall. Something screwy is going on here. I do love a good riddle, so maybe we can keep one alive to see where this is coming from. I vote for the super ugly one on the right middle." This statement was finished with a hearty laugh from the dwarf, since all goblins are super ugly to the mountain-dwelling folk. Dwarven humor, go figure. "I don't like the looks of him," OK said with an evil little grin on his face. The next second the goblin in question was suddenly sprouting an arrow out of the left eye. "I never could trust a southpaw." This sent the dwarf into a bellow of laughter, and had all the rest of the companions staring at the archer in confusion. OK making dwarven humor, what is going on here? Usually when goblins are faced with superior foes and one of their group suddenly dies, then they all just turn and run. Not this time. The goblins quickly closed up the hole in the shield wall, blocking the tunnel again. "Hold, companions," Tedavi said with a slightly surprised look on his face. "There is a magical barrier now in front of the wall protecting the goblins. Okay, watch my back as I take out the goblin shaman." With that said, Tedavi seemed to look inward, and slightly slump in place. At the same time, a goblin behind the shield wall suddenly cried out and grabbed its head. Tedavi had entered a mind battle. When a cleric attacks another cleric or wizard's mind, it is a very dangerous time for both sides. The magic users in question become helpless and stay that way till after the mind battle. Sometimes the battle is over quickly, and sometimes it lasts for a few minutes. It all depends on the strength of the mind being attacked. There is also the danger that if the attacker loses the battle, then they are now in control of the attack. A big gamble for most magic users to undertake. However, Tedavi had been blessed by his deity to have an exceptional mind. Within moments the goblin shaman exploded, sending all its magic energies plowing out in all directions. "All right," hollered Guklu as he charged the now devastated shield wall. "I love it when the evil magic guys blow up." The recovering goblins didn't seem to enjoy the sight of the massive dwarf charging them. They started to fall back when a loud voice bellowed out of the darkness behind them, and they all stopped and tried to prepare for the dwarf. "I got it," OK shouted as Hayvan looked up and motioned at the large figure coming out of the dark. 4 arrows quickly closed the distance, flying so fast as to almost touch the one in front of it. All 4 smashed on the shielding that surrounded the figure. Hayvan knew what the figure was as soon as he laid eyes on it. A large hobgoblin. Hobgoblins are twice the size of a regular goblin, and stronger than most men. If there are hobgoblins and shamans around, we may be in for a fight. This also explains how the goblins became so organized, he thought to himself as he started to cover the dwarves' back. The next arrow from OK left a glowing streak and hit with such force that the hobgoblin was thrown down to one knee, and the sound of breaking shields was easy to hear everyone. "He is mine," bellowed Guklu as he ran straight at the hobgoblin, seemingly to ignore the lesser goblins. That was fine with them as they all quickly got out of the way of the rampaging dwarf. A loud, angry roar was also coming from the hobgoblin as he ran to meet the dwarf in the tunnel. Dwarves hate many things, but they despise hobgoblins and trolls above the rest due to the dangers they pose to their brothers as they mine deep in the earth. The feeling seemed to be mutual as the hobgoblin moved his massive sword into position for a mighty strike. OK was in his element. His bow twanged again and again, and almost every arrow found a goblin target. He respected Guklu enough to leave the big guy to him alone, and he fell into the steady rhythm of draw and release, as he had been taught by his forest brothers. Hayvan was not about to be outdone by OK. No way was he going to be paying for drinks later when the tally was taken as to who killed the most enemies, and who killed the least. Hayvan's body transformed in the space of a few heartbeats into that of a huge 400-pound jaguar. With a blood-curdling scream, he leaped into the fray, never staying long enough in one spot to be hit by the slow goblins, and leaving a dead and maimed goblin king in his wake. Tedavi just stepped back and activated his battery spell, letting his mana recharge faster than it would do on its own. He figured that he had already done the most difficult part by taking out the other magic user, and had a feeling he would need all his magic soon. The battle was over quickly for everyone except the dwarf. Guklu met the first massive sword stroke on his axe and quickly countered with a backswing of his own. This was seemingly blocked with ease, and the hobgoblin backhanded the dwarf, sending him falling back a few feet. This caused the other three a moment of shock. It is no easy feat to slap a dwarf backward and should have been impossible for the hobgoblin. There was some serious magic at work here. Guklu quickly leaped forward again under the swing of his enemy's sword and body slammed the hobgoblin to the ground. It was obvious that the dwarf was very mad. He seemed to forget that he had an axe as he dropped it during the slam and just started pounding on the poor hobgoblin's head and neck. Guklu had some great armor and a very nice set of studded gauntlets. These handy coverings made short work of the hobgoblin's face and neck, and the dwarf only stopped as he started hitting through the ruined face and striking the ground underneath. "Slap me, will you?" he mumbled in anger. "Those are dwarven slaps, you nasty Sart Antali." Since none of the others spoke Dwarvish, the last words he spoke went untranslated. However, all his friends got the true meaning and had to smile to themselves as the mighty dwarf picked up his axe and wiped his hands on the dead hobgoblin's clothes. "Let's go kill some more nasty creatures." This was spoken in a mellow, almost calm voice. The tone that Guklu only used when he was truly and seriously mad. Not good for those he is mad at. The companions quickly regrouped after collecting all usable arrows and any other equipment. The tunnel ahead went a short distance, and then the companions could see that it opened up into a large room. With a mutual nod, all around the companions burst through the room ready to tackle whatever threat presented itself. "This room is huge," Hayvan thought to himself as he gazed across the 400-feet-long chamber. "All these stalactites give way to many hiding places for things to drop on our heads." His gaze instantly went from searching the ceiling to the room to the far side of the cavern. Set up there were 3 large slabs of stones along with the same evil claw cleric from the boat. However, what got his attention was his wife and 2 foster children tied to the stones, in some kind of trance, with the cleric above his children with a black knife raised, poised to strike. The other companions also noticed some troubling parts of the room. Guklu quickly grabbed Tedavi and said with a slight chuckle, "Hang on, cleric, and start the lightning." As he launched the screaming cleric at the group of goblins charging up the ramp toward the companions. Tedavi sent a quick prayer to his deity, causing lightning to pour from his hands and surrounding himself in a cloak of lightning. The goblins screamed and went flying in all directions as he smashed, shocked, and exploded into their midst. Quickly recovering, he hollered, "Dwarf, you will pay for that." And with a flick of his wrist he sent the laughing warrior flying straight through the air at the hobgoblin guards in front of the evil cleric. Guklu, while swinging his massive axe at the closest hobgoblin, happily cheered, "Thanks, cleric, much faster than walking." Then the speeding dwarf hit the stunned-looking hobgoblins. All 3 hobgoblins guarding the claw cleric and the mighty dwarf crashed together in a spray of blood, curses, and shouts of fright. OK quickly drew and fired at the claw cleric, hoping to stop the downward plunge of the knife with his arrows, but the arrows just struck the side of the cleric's shield, causing no damage and not phasing the claw cleric in the least. Quickly redrawing a single arrow, he started concentrating on it, and the feeling of power started to build around him once again. Hayvan realized that there was no way he could get to the cleric in time to stop him. "Please forgive me, dear friends," he thought to his companions through Tedavi. "It is the only way." Hayvan recognized the ritual as one of blood magic that will increase the claw cleric's strength tenfold with each victim. Hayvan let himself go, and reached as deep into the earth's magic as he could, drawing in every bit as possible to reach the most powerful, most dangerous, and almost surely most suicidal form any druid can become. That of an ancient red dragon. The dragon's roar of anger and triumph ripped through the large cavern with the force of a small magical freight train, sending everyone and everything into a tumble. Tedavi recovered first as all the goblins around him took off in every direction as fast as they could. He tried to reach out to the dragon's mind to help his friend, but there was no response, and he couldn't even get past the magical protection on the ancient beast's mind. Guklu looked on in horror, as he had seen the damage that a dragon can do firsthand from his time digging with his dwarven brethren. He had only survived the assault as they accidentally dug into the dragon's lair because his now dead friend had tackled him into a fissure in the floor, sending him sliding to safety 2 floors below the chamber, and protecting his body from fiery death with his own. That was a smaller brown dragon that had killed his whole group of 20 hardened dwarven warriors, while this was an ancient red, many times more powerful and dangerous. OK knew he was in mortal danger, as his dear friend seemed to explode next to him and become the form that all fear the most, that of a druid lost in a beast that can kill them all. All he could think to do was freeze, as the beast ignored him at the moment since all of its concentration was focused on the claw cleric. The claw cleric in question had just finished with the second foster child and was moving towards the last altar when the dragon's roar of anger and rage echoed across the chamber. He quickly swung around, having increased his powers immensely from his 2 previous kills. "Foolish druid," the claw cleric snarled, "you will kill all your friends now, and then I will be back for their bodies when you leave." As he finished, he started to step into a patch of shadow to make his escape. The only problem was that there were suddenly no shadows around him as he started to glow brightly from a light spell cast by Tedavi. "Time to pay for your sins." Tedavi shouted at the claw cleric, "Good luck getting away from Hayvan now." Quote. Tedavi's words seemed to ring with the truth of a minor prophecy. One that the druid, dragon, had no qualms filling. With a great snap of his wings and a mighty push from his huge hind legs, Hayvan launched himself straight at the claw cleric, ignoring everything in his way. This caused the chamber to have a small explosion as all the obstacles in the dragon's path just disintegrated under his powerful form. The claw cleric quickly brought up some shields in front of the dragon, and surrounded himself with a protective bubble, using all the extra power taken from his grisly tasks in one last bid for his life. Such was a waste when compared with a rampaging red dragon. Hayvan crashed through the shield with hardly a pause, and his massive neck shot out with lightning speed to grab onto the evil cleric's bubble. There was a loud pop as the bubble burst, and then the crunching sound as the claw cleric was no more. Screaming was the next thing that was heard echoing across the cavern, as the magic holding Hayvan's wife was released with the death of the evil cleric. Also, there was some undercurrent of deep weeping, which later was thought to be dwarven terror, but no one has ever been daring or stupid enough to ask the massive dwarf about it. The dragon's head started to flash down at the last altar with its victim still strapped on when a strange thing occurred. An overpowering, powerful, yet loving presence was suddenly filling the cavern with undiluted power. All inside the room were frozen in place, including the druid. A deep, peaceful voice, yet one filled with the knowledge and wisdom of ages, echoed across the chamber, seeming to come from all around them, yet from nowhere at the same time. Hayvan, my chosen child, you have sacrificed much in your life on your quest to make the world a better place. Your sacrifices have not gone unnoticed by those greater powers that help to lead and mold the races. This last sacrifice would be too great, the loss of all your children, family, and friends in one moment, not to mention the loss of your mind as well in the shape of the amazing beast you now hold. We have decided to step in this time and grant you the chance to stop, so you can still have your mate, and fulfill the destiny you and your friends have yet to fill. I give you your true natural form back. This was spoken as Hayvan's form suddenly changed back into a human, and he collapsed onto the ground, but we are powerless to bring those that are dead back from the other side at this time. They have finished the work they were sent out to accomplish, and we will place their noble souls into the bodies we have chosen to act as protectors and companions for your mate as you travel. It is our will that you shall never need to worry about her safety again. With that amazing statement, there was a flash of intense, ultra-bright light, and where the children's mutilated bodies were now crouched a massive black panther and a large griffin. The light of intelligence shone from their eyes, and they turned knowing looks at their father. The companions were not sure what to make of this whole development for a few seconds. It was also observed that all the goblinoid creatures were now gone, and dust was sitting in their places. Tedavi was first to react. A great destiny, huh? He said with a slight shrug and a look to convey incredulity. Who'd have thought that the bestiary deity would come to our aid a second time in order to save you, Hayvan? You may want to try to find out more about him in the near future. Usually, deities don't just go about saving people unless they want something in return. Guklu recovered next with a wild howl of joy at seeing his friend and mate both alive and well. Come here, you crazy tall people. He shouted as he wrapped them both up in his huge arms, causing them to lose all the breath in their lungs. This was over quickly as a massive cat's paw reached out and easily sent the dwarf tumbling away, and another large paw sent him sliding a few feet across the room. Standing in front of the newly reunited couple were the transformed children, obviously taking their new guard duty very seriously. My friends. I am truly sorry, Hayvan said with a smile on his face that lit the whole cavern. I did not know of another way to stop the cleric in time, and I could not lose my wife and children and stay sane. He finished his statement by wrapping his arms around his wife, and then hugging his newly transformed protectors. Looks like we all came out okay. This time, OK said with his usually calm manner, but please don't ever do that again, you almost sat on me. Quote. Then you would be the right size, finally. Guklu said with all the companions breaking into happy laughter at the joke, and the knowledge that they were going to make it for another day, together again.